back to City and State TV. I'm Morgan Pehme coming to you live from SOMOS 2014 here in San Juan. We're at the City and State Hub with State Senator Kevin Parker. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, Morgan.
So, you know, I've been hearing for months about how the people of New York wanted a Democratic state Senate. So, is that just not true?
Well, I don't think that's not true. I just think we had a hard time, getting our message across and really winning in the right places. As you saw, we were part of a national wave where not only was the U.S. Senate taken, but state houses across the country were actually taken over by Republicans. And so I think that we need to, look at things that we did this time, figure out, where we misstepped, and fix our steps going forward.
You know, there's been a great debate about whether the governor betrayed the Senate Democrats by not campaigning hard enough for you. What's your take on that?
No, I certainly wouldn't call anything that the governor did a betrayal. I think that we worked well with the governor at certain points, but I think that we have to win elections, right? It's up to the Democratic Senate to field candidates in the right places with the right credentials and the right backgrounds to properly fund those candidates and message those candidates in a way that communicates with our voters. We didn't do that, and to be honest with you, and you can see that because we did not get enough people out to the polls to vote for our candidates.
Yeah, I'm particularly incensed about the fact that there was a 1 million vote drop-off in New York State, which is part of a trend of just fewer and fewer New Yorkers participating. To what do you attribute that trend, and do you feel like that's a repudiation of our politics?
I think to some degree it is a repudiation, a little bit of our politics, but I think that all of us have to work harder at being better at communicating with our voters exactly what we're doing for them, how they benefit from being involved in the system, and what the outcomes are that we've actually accomplished. Because again, we have a governor who have a great deal of accomplishments. We have a legislature that has done a great deal over the last 2 years to make sure that New Yorkers have the things they need. But we have to communicate that to them.
So many states have early voting. They have all these mechanisms that drive up voter participation, none of which we've embraced, and it doesn't seem to be a priority of the legislature. Why isn't the legislature taking that bull by the horns, and what would you do from a legislative standpoint to try to drive up voter participation?
Well, that's a good question. I actually have a whole package of bills that deal with the issue of voter participation. Early voting is one of the bills I have. I also think that we ought to look more at internet voting. I have a bill that takes voting from 1 day to several days, whether that's an early voting model or a regular voting model. But the question is, why are we still doing what we did 100 years ago as it relates to voting? Why is it 1 day? Why is it only from 6 o'clock in the morning to 9 p.m., right? Let's do it 24 hours a day. I mean, we have a city that never sleeps in New York City. We certainly could have a voting system that reflects that.
And we already put all of our most vital information online. Why is it that we feel like we're going to impugn the voting process by enabling people to cast their ballots over the internet?
Agreed. And I think, some of your voters, listeners might know that I'm actually a political science professor, right? So one of the people I work with is Francis Fox Piven, who along with Dr. Clower wrote a book called Why Americans Don't Vote. And part of it has to do with the registration system. I actually have a bill that actually does a selective service type registration system where essentially we set up a set of disincentives for people not registering. We ought to have automatic registration for people. Why do we have to make people come in to register? And it ought to be similar to selective services where there are some disincentives for you not to register, so that we get actually more people involved, and thus drop-offs wouldn't be as frequent as we're seeing them now.
Like the many countries where you have to pay a penalty
Correct.
if you don't vote.
Correct. I mean, out of the top 30 democracies in the world, we're only number 29, right? Number 16 is Italy, which only became a democracy in 1976. I'm not being bad about Italy, but I'm just saying we've been we're one of the most famous democracies in the world. We certainly could do better in terms of getting our voters access to the ballot.
It's absolutely embarrassing. Of course, you are also very engaged in energy, one of the most knowledgeable Democrats in that field. What do you think is going to be the dynamics within your committee now with the Republicans taking a full majority?
Well, they've had the majority for the last 2 years, right? So I think we'll have a little bit more of the same. The former chair, George Maziarz, who I work with, I'm the ranking member on the Energy and Telecom Committee, and I work very closely with George Maziarz, who's decided not to run for re-election. There's going to be a new chair. They haven't announced who it is. But I think that there's going to be, I'm going to be looking to do what I've done in the past, which is have a lot of collaboration. There's really three things that are important for me in the context of energy and telecom. I think the first thing is to make sure that we look at energy as not just a commodity, but also as an industry, and build the industry and have research and development being done here in the state. The second is alternative energy. We have to certainly continue to invest in alternative energy and reduce both our carbon footprint and our reliance on fossil fuels. And third is we have to build the green collar economy that makes sure that we are, again, connected to one, not just build R&D and back end and the industry part of the energy industry, but also produce those jobs here in the state of New York so that we can put people in full-time jobs with a living wage with benefits.
You talk about the Energy Committee. I mean, this is a real tightrope committee that you have to walk, right? Because there's so many conflicting interests that all have a confluence within this one committee. I know that there are a lot of people who have been waiting with bated breath for some sort of resolution about hydrofracking. How do you think that that's going to play out?
Well, I think, again, this is a ball that seems to be in the governor's court. And what I've said to people who want to do fracking is that it's really a matter of this. We have to protect the watershed, particularly for New York City, but all the water resources for the state. You'll see California is in the middle of a drought. Texas has been going through a drought. We can't afford to have that in the state of New York. And so what I've said simply is that there's a number of proprietary chemicals that are being used in the hydrofracking process. Tell us, under local confidentiality, what these proprietary chemicals are so that we can test them independently and determine that they either can be mitigated or that they are neutral to the water stream before some of us can be supportive of something that's so invasive to our watershed. And until that happens, I think that we have to be wary about going forward with hydrofracking.
On the alternative energy front, my colleague Wilder Fleming wrote an article in the last issue of City and State saying, while the governor has done a great job in moving solar power forward, it seems that the state has really kind of dropped the ball on pushing for wind power. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that it's much to do about nothing, to be honest with you. I think the governor should be really, really, really exalted for what he's done around the issue of solar. I think that it's really, really important. That does not mean that the ball has been dropped on wind, but I think that he's moving things some at a time. The year before that, he spent a lot of time on transmission, right? And so it's kind of like how do you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And I think the first bite was around transmission. The second bite, has been around solar, and the third bite may be around wind or maybe hydro. So there's lots of different elements that we can exploit here. And we still haven't talked about biodiesel. We still haven't talked about thermal. We haven't talked about cogeneration of things. So there's lots of options and a lot of opportunities that we need to exploit here in the state of New York. And so I commend the governor for what he's done so far, but there's still a lot more work that needs to be done.
The IDC, earlier this year, you guys kissed and made up. It seemed like there was going to be a new coalition, and now today we hear Senator Klein saying that he would like to continue his partnership with the Republicans. I mean, how does that make you feel? Is that a betrayal? And how do you think that the rest of the Democrats should deal with the IDC?
Oh, and that's not a betrayal at all. That partnership and the arrangement that we made in the spring was predicated on us winning elections. We unfortunately did not win those elections, and so you find Jeff Klein and the IDC making a decision that is best for its few members and what they think they need to do for their constituency. Had we won the election and they still decided to go with Republicans, that would have been a different story. But I think we have a responsibility to win our elections and move forward on that basis.
I understand it on a district level, but I mean, isn't that kind of like a mercenary mentality?
I would love all Democrats to unite under the banner of Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins and the leadership of the Democratic Party. That's not the reality that we have right now. And so until we win enough elections to put ourselves in a firm majority, kind of is what it is at this point, and we'll work with all the members of the Senate to see that things get done. The IDC has said that they are a progressive group and that they are going to bring important things. Now another opportunity to bring the important issues for the people of the state of New York to the floor. Let's do a real minimum wage. Let's really do something around the women's equality agenda. Those are the challenges that I'll put forward to them. It's not about where they sit and what conference room they're in. It's really about what do they bring forward to the floor that advances the agenda of the people of the state of New York.
So, going back to the election, I mean, you don't think that Senate Democrats should be chastened a bit by the outcome on Tuesday? Again,
I think that outcome was in our own hands, right? And then now the time that we have right this moment is about how do we govern together, right? The election's over. It's now time to govern. How the coalition works is less important than what items come to the floor and what items have an opportunity to pass on the floor. So let's get the DREAM Act to the floor. Let's get a minimum wage to the floor. Let's get a Women's Equality Party bill, to the floor. Let's pass all 10, planks in that, in that platform.
How's that going to happen? I mean, the Republicans aren't going to let that happen.
Again, the IDC and the Republicans said that they want to govern. These are the things that the people in the state said they want. Bring them to the floor and let's get a vote, up and down vote on them.
But won't the IDC just be gravy for the Republicans at this point? That they'll, with their true majority, they'll be able to block all those things that you just talked about?
That is not my problem. My problem is to provide the votes on the Democratic side, which we've done. It is really up to Jeff Klein and the members of the IDC to bring these progressive items that they said that they believe in to the floor. Get us votes on these things that are important. In fact, just today, I stood shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues and the members of 32BJ, and I said that we actually ought to bring us all back to the Senate now. Now that we've actually elected a few people to fill some unexpired terms, we have an opportunity to take an up and down vote on minimum wage today, on the DREAM Act today. So, the governor, Dean Skelos, Jeff Klein, bring us back to this. Bring the Senate back into session before January. Let's not wait. Let's not wait until tomorrow of the progressive things that we can do for the state and the people of the state of New York today.
Well, you say it's not your problem, how the Republicans are going to handle the chamber, but isn't that exactly what we've seen, like in Washington, that we have the two parties at loggerheads so obstinately pushing for their agendas instead of trying to look for the common ground, the compromises to drive forward the country and the state for the good of the people instead of for the agendas of the respective parties?
Dialogue hasn't been the problem. I mean, I think there's a significant dialogue that happens between both the leadership and the individual members of all three conferences in the context of the state Senate. I think now is a time for action. Time for thought. We've been talking about this stuff for a long time. Bring us back. Bring the bills to the floor. Let's have an up and down vote on the DREAM Act, an up and down vote on raising the minimum wage, an up and down vote on the women's equality agenda. And let's see, where we are in the Senate, and let's put these things forward so that we can do the people's work.
So, Senator Skelos, Senator Klein, Senator Parker's put the ball in your court. Professor and Senator Kevin Parker, thank you so much for joining me on City and State TV.
Thanks for having me.